Okay, so we are going to take notes on 3.1 here, intermolecular forces. So you might hear College Board or me say IMFs. Okay, so these guys is just abbreviation for it. So it just means intermolecular forces. Okay. So we need to explain the difference between intramolecular forces and intermolecular forces. And we kind of talked about this. I might have been in our first unit or was last unit. I'm not fully sure yet, or I don't remember, obviously. So here is the difference. So for intramolecular forces, okay, that is going to be the actual bonds within a molecule. Okay, so intra is the bonds within a molecule. Okay, and these are forces. Okay, and then intermolecular forces, which we're going to focus this whole unit on, but you have to know the difference. That is going to be between molecules, and there's 3 of them that we have to know. Okay, so for instance, if I draw a diagram here, if I have hydrochloric acid, which is HF, okay, if I put HF in a beaker, there's not one single HF molecule, there's multiple. So that means there is going to be HF there's going to be HF there. They're just going to be all over the place, okay? So for HF, the force that is the bond, that's intra, okay? And then what is between them, which I'm going to do a dash, okay, that is going to be our inter. So it's inter or in between, okay? So that is our intermolecular force, okay? And there's only certain ways it happens. So did you notice I did not draw a dash between the 2 hydrogens because there is no force there that I'm showing in this picture here, okay? Now, the next one says, what is the difference? Oh, shoot, I'll zoom in. Between London dispersion and van der Waals forces. So if you took AP Bio, you probably have heard these terms before, which is good. I mean, it's been a while. I think you guys do that in like Unit 1 in the beginning. Okay, so London dispersion forces is the one that we mostly use in this class. Okay, so van der Waals is just kind of a broad term. Okay. And this one is a specific type of force. Okay, so you might hear both of them. It's not that big of a deal, but the one we like to use is London dispersion. Okay, I could go more in detail in these 2, but we really don't need to know that for AP, so I'm not going to do it. You might actually get into it, and there's a whole bunch of math for it, like calculus, to demonstrate these forces and how they work, but that is not at our level. Okay, so we need to know 3 different types of forces. First one is London dispersion, which I kind of already said up at the top here. So London dispersion, sometimes known as LDF, that's what you'll hear me say, because I don't like to say London dispersion, I just like to say LDF, it's faster. We have hydrogen bonding, and then we have dipole-dipole. Okay, so we need to know which ones are weak and which ones are strong because we're going to be able to describe the different interactions between them all. So the weakest is going to be LDF. Okay, then we have dipole-dipole in the middle. And then we have hydrogen bonding. I'm just going to do H bond. Okay. Of course, if you decide to take the College Board test, you are going to want to describe these like in full. Okay. So like don't write H bond or LDF. You probably should write it out. Okay. But for me, it's not a big deal. So you might be asking, what are these? So these are different types of forces between molecules. So for LDF, the most common way to memorize LDF is that they are in all molecules. Okay. Interaction force, and they are especially in nonpolar molecules. So our last quiz that we took on Lewis diagrams, you had to tell me, is it a polar or a nonpolar molecule? Well, this is where it's going to come into play. Okay. Dipole-dipole is for polar molecules. And then H bond is when you have a hydrogen that is, how should I word that? That is next to a fluorine. oxygen, or nitrogen. And what I like to say is that hydrogen bonding is fun. F-O-N. Okay. Anyway, if a molecule has H bond, that means, or hydrogen bonding, that means it also has dipole-dipole and it has LDF. Okay, so if you go all the way up to the strongest force, that means it's going to have dipole-dipole and LDF in it also. If you have dipole-dipole, that means it's also going to have LDF, and then LDF is only LDF. Okay, so H bond is the strongest. It explains a lot why water has its properties and why water is so essential to human beings. But we will identify those either like later on in the notes here, or I think I might even save most of that for when we do the practice problems on Thursday and Friday together. Okay, so those are our three forces, and you must know the strengths of them. Okay. The next thing, the strength of dispersion forces increase as the size of the atom's electron cloud, we're going to say increases. Okay, so if you have LDF, the bigger you are, stronger the force. Okay, and what we're going to say is the stronger the force is because you are more polarizable. Okay, so these are keywords that you're going to have to use in this description. So for this type of unit, you're going to be describing a lot, but that's okay. So you might be, well, what is polarizability? Okay, and there's a diagram that kind of shows it. So it's basically how easily an electron cloud can be distorted. Okay, so that means uneven charge. Okay, now electron cloud contains the electrons. Okay, so for instance here, we have charges that are evenly distributed, okay, according to this molecule. Well, if we have a polar molecule and an ion that comes up like a force that's in between here, let's say what is going to happen to these evenly distributed charges is that they're going to be distorted and moved. So what's going to happen is all those positives, how many do we have? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and negative, they're all going to line up and they're going to go to their certain sides. Now you might be asking, or maybe you didn't even think of this, why are the positives on this side? Well, do you guys notice that the negative end right over here has to line up with the positives? Because in regular chem, you should have learned, or hopefully this will jog your memory a bit, that opposites attract each other. So you always want a negative end and a positive end next to each other. So that's why up here, I didn't draw a force in between these two hydrogens, because both those hydrogens are technically positive, okay? And like a fluorine, it's negative, electronegative, and it's by a positive hydrogen, so they will line up with each other, okay? Here we go. So I want to list the following atoms in order of decreasing polarizability. Okay, so this is the lowest polarizability, and then we have the highest polarizability. So what you're going to do is you are going to find these guys on the periodic table. Okay, and so I like to think of it like this. So smaller equals lowest polarizability, because you have less charges and weaker forces. Lower polarizability, so you are weaker. So if you go to the periodic table, that's why it was so important to memorize those atomic radiuses. I'm trying to find a periodic table here. Ow, my head. So if you find the periodic table, remember fluorine is up here. Remember, if you are towards the right and up at the top, you are the smallest. So if I compare fluorine, which is right here, gallium right here, where's tungsten? Tungsten is W, right where my pinky finger is, okay? And then barium is all the way over here, okay? So if I was going to do the smallest, it would be fluorine, then gallium, then tungsten, and then barium being the biggest. So smallest is going to be the lowest polarizability, okay? So that's why I'm going to put fluorine. I'm just going to do their symbols. So fluorine's F, and then we're going to have gallium, Ga, then we're going to have tungsten, W, and then barium is our biggest, Okay, so I'll write it up here, smallest, lowest polarizability, so weaker force, and then barium down here is going to be the biggest. Okay, now we are going to flip the page. Okay, hopefully we saw that okay. We're going to continue on with the notes here. Okay, so we have our two molecules here, and so it says analyze the two molecules to the right. Which molecule would be more likely to experience an induced dipole, and then explain your reasoning. So remember, our induced dipole, we're going to be talking about polarizability. I don't think I spelled that right, but okay. Now, when we look at this molecule and how it is drawn, we are going to see which molecule is the biggest, okay? So you might be like, well, it's kind of hard to tell, I guess, maybe a little bit, but do you see how bromine and carbon have all these electrons in the electron cloud? Well, if you compare bromine and oxygen, right, because there is a carbon in the middle, so that stays the same. The only difference is that we have 2 oxygen and 4 bromine. So if you look at bromine here, bromine's right here, and then oxygen's all the way up here. Bromine is clearly bigger than oxygen. So remember, if you are bigger, you are going to have a bigger electron cloud and you're going to be more polarizable. So I would say that this is carbon tetrafluoride, right? 4 bromine. So carbon tetrafluoride, or not fluoride, bromide, my bad. Because electron cloud is bigger equals more polarizable. Okay, stronger IMFs. Okay. So that's how I would describe it. So when it comes down to that stuff, you're going to look at LDF. You always want to look at the size. Okay. Which would have the higher boiling point? Well, boiling point, let's consider, is giving something energy, right? You're going to try to heat it up and get the boiling point. Well, if you are bigger and you have stronger IMFs, it's going to be hard to break those down. I mean, obviously, if you think of human beings, if you are a stronger human being, it's hard to break that human being down, okay, if you're going to fight them or something. I don't know, okay? So you are going to tell me which one has the higher boiling point. It's going to be CBr4, okay? Because it is a bigger molecule. So you're kind of restating the same stuff again, not molecules, bigger molecule. Okay. More polarizable equals stronger IMFs. Okay. And then you need more energy, which means higher boiling point. Higher. I'm going to say BP for boiling point. Okay. Okay, now we are going to talk kind of about ions here. Okay, and again, we're going to do a lot of examples, like I said, on Thursday and Friday, and it's usually the same wording each time, so it's not too bad. Okay, so it says, in the box to the left, draw a particle diagram showing how water, 3 molecules, would orient themselves around a chloride ion, and what type of intermolecular forces cause this orientation. Okay, so this is a great depiction on how we have salt and how water is attracted to salt and all different types of ions. So it says chlorine ion. So if I go to the periodic table, I find chlorine, it is a -1. So in order to draw a diagram, which they like to do this one a lot, is I'm going to draw chlorine and I'm going to have it labeled as -1 and I'm going to draw a circle around it. Okay, now I have to draw water. Well, we know how to draw a Lewis diagram for water. If you calculated all the stuff, you did it the correct shape, it would look like this, okay? Now it says we need 3 of those. So we need to orient it towards chlorine. But now you have to decide, because we have to decide of charges, how on the front here, we did some positive, oh, you can't even see that. We did some positive and negative. So we need to figure out which side's positive and which side's negative. So you remember, I think it was unit 1, we talked about electronegativity, okay? So remember, big F on the periodic table is the most electronegative, right? So you are going to have a negative charge associated with you. So if I go look and find hydrogen and I find oxygen on the periodic table, oxygen is the closest to fluorine. So that means it's going to be the most electronegative. So I'm going to say that oxygen is going to have the more negative side and the hydrogens are going to have the more positive side. Okay, and that's based off electronegativity. So now you need to decide, should I put the oxygen side close to chlorine or should I put the hydrogen side close to chlorine? Well, remember, opposites attract. Okay, so that means when you draw this water molecule, you probably want to put the positive side close to chlorine because chlorine is -1. So when I draw my molecule, I'm going to kind of do it like upside down. And I'm just going to label my sides here. This is positive, this is negative. There we go. One water molecule attracted to the chlorine atom or ion. Now you need to draw 3 because it asked for 3. Okay, so then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm still going to have my hydrogens. Now, I really don't care where you put them. Obviously, you need the positive with the negative side, but you could draw them however you want. Okay, and then I'm going to draw one over here. There you go. Okay, so now my whole entire water molecule is surrounding the chlorine. That is how you would do that. And now it says what type of intermolecular force. Okay, so water and the ion, since it's an ion, we're going to say that's an ion dipole force. Okay, now we did not list ion dipole force in the beginning when we were ranking them. But since it says the word ion, the chlorine ion, that means it's going to be ion dipole. And this is a pretty strong force. Okay, it is going to be the strongest, even stronger than hydrogen bonding. Okay, but that is our new one, and it's only when you have an ion like that. Okay. The next one on the bottom here says, in the box to the right, draw 3 water molecules in proper orientation to each other. What type of IMF causes this orientation? And use your drawing to indicate the intermolecular force. Okay, so it says we need 3 water molecules. Well, we drew water. We already labeled that that's the positive and negative. Okay, so I'm going to draw my first one. Okay, here's the positive, here's negative. Now, I need to draw another water molecule. Now, I would say put the hydrogen, and I'm going to go out of the box here, next to the oxygen, right? Because it's positive and positive and negative and negative. I'm going to draw my dash between the oxygen and hydrogen because that's my positive and that's my negative, and positive and negative attract each other. Okay, I don't care how you draw this as long as you have a hydrogen next to an oxygen. I need one more. So here's my dash. Since that's a hydrogen, I need my oxygen, which is negatively charged by my positive. And then I'm going to draw my 2 hydrogens down below. I'm going to label them positive. Okay, now you could have drew this any way. I don't really care as long as you, like I said, you have the positive with the negative. Now, in this force right here, this IMF, I have a hydrogen next to an oxygen. So you're going to go to the front side here. Now, London dispersion is all nonpolar molecules. Well, water's not nonpolar. It's a polar molecule. Okay, so I have dipole-dipole. Well, do you have a hydrogen that's next to a F, O, or N? And so if I look at my diagram here, I have a hydrogen that's next to an O. So this main force that you're primarily going to have is hydrogen bonding. Now, if they asked you to list all the forces, so this is the main force, hydrogen bonding is all the way at the end. So that means it also must have dipole-dipole and LDF. Okay, so like I said, if you had to list them all, it would have LDF, it has dipole-dipole, and H bond, hydrogen bonding. But H bond is the main one. Okay, that's the strongest force. Okay, and I included a dash to show the intermolecular force. Okay, so that's how you would draw them. Now we have one more page here, 2 more examples. Okay, it says in the box to the left, draw 3 methanol molecules in your drawing. Use a dashed line to indicate where the hydrogen bonding can occur. Okay, so I have to draw CH3. So C is going to go in the middle. I'm going to attach my hydrogens. I'm going to attach my oxygen, and I'm going to attach my H, and I'm going to draw my little dots there. Okay, so that is my methanol. Now, they want 3 of them. Okay, so they want me to use hydrogen bonding. So remember, hydrogen bonding, you must have a hydrogen next to an oxygen, fluorine, or nitrogen. Okay, now methanol does not have any nitrogen in it, and it does not have any fluorine. So that means it's the oxygen that it has to be by. So if I was going to draw my next methanol, I'm going to draw it sideways. I'm going to attach my hydrogens just like this. Okay, I'm going to have my oxygen here, and I'm going to have my hydrogen. Okay, now you could draw it any way you want. I just need my oxygen next to my hydrogen right here. Now that is my H bond. Okay, right? Because hydrogen bonding is fun, F-O-N. So you need a hydrogen next to one of those guys, which I do. I have a hydrogen next to my oxygen. That's my dashed line. I know it doesn't look too dashed, but that's what it is. Now it wants a third one. So I'm going to draw my third molecule. Okay. You can pick any hydrogen you want. It really doesn't matter. Okay. So I'm going to pick this one right here. So I'm going to draw my oxygen. I'm going to draw out my full methanol. Okay. I'm going to take my purple marker. I'm going to have H bond. Okay. Now you could have this oxygen form it with this hydrogen over here. Okay. It doesn't matter. Like I said, I know mine's kind of crooked and technically I was supposed to draw it in the box, but as long as you have 3 of them and you show where the hydrogen bonding is and you label it, then you're good to go. Okay. Now, the more hydrogen bonding spots you have, the stronger you are. So I'm just going to write that in the box since I didn't do it before. So more H bond locations equal stronger IMF. Okay. Now, one thing that I do want to mention before I end the video here almost is just write this down. Now, it doesn't necessarily go to just this example, but the stronger IMF means higher boiling point, BP, and melting point. Okay, so you need a lot of energy to break that intermolecular force. Okay. The next one says, in this diagram of DNA, how many hydrogen bonds would be formed between the thymine and adenine, and how many hydrogen bonds form between the guanine and cytosine? So draw them with a dotted line. So I'm just not going to do this example here because typically we don't have biology molecules and I want to end the video so you have time. But in order to find all of the hydrogen bonds, you are basically going to find where H is next to an F, H is next to an O, and H is next to, dotted line, next to an N. Okay, those are all my spots. And again, like I said, the more H bond locations you have, the stronger the IMF. Okay, and so this is going to later, once we get to examples, explain why stuff mixes with each other and stuff does not mix with each other. So down at the bottom, just to preview some stuff that is coming up here. So if you have like IMFs, so similar, and again, this is coming up in a later section, you are going to mix. If you have different IMFs, not mix. So that is why oil, I'll write that down here, example, that is why oil and water don't mix. Okay. Oil has LDF, the main force, and water has H bond. And you might be saying, well, doesn't H bond also have LDF? Yes, it does. But you look at the main strongest force in the molecule. So since it has H bond and this one has LDF, they are different IMFs. So that is why it explains why they do not mix well with each other. Okay. Before I stop the video, so you know exactly what you're doing, what I need you to do is, please do this. So this one that I handed out yesterday before the lab, I need you guys to read through this. okay? Because this is going to explain a lot. And again, we're going to use it when we do the worksheet. So please read through this. And then what I want you to do with the cutout stuff here, so I gave you this and I attached yellow sheets, so I kind of did it for you. So what you're going to do, these are going to be the headings right here. So dipole, hydrogen bonding, LDF, ion dipole, and intermolecular forces. Those are the headings. And then you are going to paste these examples under what heading they should be with. Okay, so for instance, I have intermolecular forces of attraction. I put it at the top. I glued hydrogen bonding first and then ion dipole. And then I drew a little squiggle to separate them. And then on my second sheet of paper, I did dipole and London dispersion. So now all that I have left to do is I have to cut this stuff out. So for instance, if I look at this one right here, I notice there's an oxygen dash next to a H. Okay, so I would know from my notes that that is hydrogen bonding. So I would cut this square out and then I would paste it underneath hydrogen bonding. Okay, so I'm kind of giving you like all these examples here, and I want you to tell me what intermolecular force are we talking about. And again, this will help a lot, especially when we go do the worksheet. So please make sure you cut that stuff out and you paste them for me. So do that. Finish the notes, like I said. Well, obviously, if you're done watching the video, you have. And then read through this. I know like it seems like a lot, but this unit is so important. Okay, I don't know how to end the video.